So apparently I'm disabled to share screen. There we go, I'm in, perfect, okay. Sorry guys, that's what happens with technology sometimes, as we all know. I'm just gonna make sure we start at the beginning. Okay, we're gonna start with walking us through what we're gonna be looking at and learning today. So the hopes of the evening will be that we'll give you a brief kind of understanding of what is a microboard, what does it consist of, what you should know about it before even considering a microboard. And we're really going to focus a lot on the role of the facilitator within the microboard. So how they manage a microboard, how they support the person, and how they might support the movement through the process of becoming a microboard. Some of those things that we will be talking about also include grounding the person, the whole team, the microboard, in the person-directed values. So the microboard is an extension of person-directed planning and person-directed values. We'll talk a little bit about that and how we maintain that. Helping the people make decisions, the person supported themselves, and what is that supportive decision-making process? How do we foster it within a microboard and make sure that it stays central? How do we support a person maintain the role as the lead of the microboard, the voice that is being listened to, and how do we make sure that we empower in that role? And finally, how we foster and support all the microboard members in terms of figuring out where they fit in among the team, because it really is a team when we look at all the members of the microboard. And the piece that I love the best, is the succession planning piece. And that's an area that I strongly empower microboards to begin looking at early. And it is part of the discussion at every single meeting. We actually add it in our agenda to make sure that we're really making sure that the microboard is going to be the piece and the sustainable component that keeps possibly the housing model alive, or possibly just a person's circle of support and their team alive, along with all the functions of the microboard. So we're going to start at the very, very beginning. Most of you might already know this. I'm sure it's not your first session or workshop with Microboards Ontario, but Microboards is basically just an legally incorporated not-for-profit organization. And so it's incorporated either provincially or federally. We've actually recently moved to incorporating things more provincially because the province has changed some of the legislation. But a microboard, in order to be called a microboard and use the term microboard, must consist of 5 directors, one of which would be the person that's actually being supported. And what we try to encourage as facilitators is that we look beyond immediate family members, and that we expand beyond that role, just because there is a power dynamic with a person supported and family members sometimes. And sometimes it's really just nice to have a fresh perspective coming in, new eyes, and new ways to view the situation, and different ways to approach things. The supports within the microboard and what the microboard's goals are for the person include everything that has to do with planning for the person's life. So any concept, idea, problem-solving area that the facilitator might have and need more eyes on, or concept for future housing or future activities or goals, can be brought to the microboard. It's also meant to support and assist the person in making sure their voice is heard. So, a lot of people use the term advocacy. I just like, a strong voice empowering a person, or negotiation tactics, not only advocacy. But it allows a group of people to stand with that person and support them to follow through on their decisions with whatever organization they're looking for support from, or whatever community space they're looking to be included in. It also allows and supports people in making sure their services that they have contracted with are contracted with properly, and that those services and supports are actually services and supports that have been chosen with thoughtfulness and are safe, and are continuing to support the person throughout their life. So as you know, people's needs change, And so sometimes service needs do have to change. They have to look for new providers. It supports people in connecting to their community, whatever method that is. We usually call facilitators the bridge. And if you think of the Microboard as a larger bridge with more kind of arms and legs that can reach out further, that's basically what it is. It's a bigger network of people that can help them connect to their community and find new opportunities. And the most important piece, and Karen's always reminding me, and everybody at the meetings, the families always remind me, is that relationship and time together, and the quality of the time together is the most important piece of Microboard. So Microboard is founded in relationships, and it is not just a bunch of strangers making decisions with a person. It's a bunch of people that care about the person, who have their back, who are helping them make the bigger decisions in their life to support them to live their best life. So we're going to start with the core values of a Microboard. And when you do become a Microboard, there's actually bylaws that are written in for all Microboard members, and they will include some of these values as well. So relationships is always the most important thing. And we all learned that through COVID, that really it's about all of our happiness and everything that makes our life good is about our relationships. And so building those relationships, fostering those relationships, and maintaining those relationships are crucial. All decisions that the person makes is really based on what the person wants. So it's their wishes, needs, interests, based on their strengths and the supports that have been developed by the person and with the person, with the support of their facilitator, that the Microboard is meant to operationalize for that person. And so they might not be doing the basic operation stuff. They may be providing the oversight of it, but they're making sure that the goals of the person are being respected and adhered to. Microboards and facilitators would be teaching Microboard members that every person has a gift, whether it's the person themselves in the center of the Microboard or people within the team, and that we hope to support people in having their gifts shine. So basically, the family members, whoever is a part of the Microboard, as well as the person themselves, are contributing, and they have a valued role in their community, as do the members of the Microboard have a valued role within that Microboard. I often get questions regarding, proximity of a person who's on a Microboard. When we create Microboards, the person doesn't have to live near the person geographically. It's more about the proximity of the relationship. So is the relationship strong enough and maintained properly so that they can still support the person in those big decisions in their life? Because one of the primary roles that we'll talk about later is supportive decision-making. And unless you have that strong relationship and can read the person well, even if they're nonverbal, then those decisions are hard to help a person with. So this is a little quick video. It's actually of a family that I did support to create their model. And just to give people context, Jonathan is an individual who is nonverbal, who has a Microboard, and the Microboard was a big part of how his housing model was created. And I'm not sure whether the family mentions it in this video, but the model changed based on people understanding that Jonathan wasn't happy with the model that was created, because he was attending all the meetings and we realized we weren't going down the right path. So I'll let you guys listen to this and just understand a little bit more about Jonathan and his family and the Microboard.
I'm Imelda, and this is Ray, my husband. And Ray and I have 3 children, 38-year-old Andrea, and Jonathan, who is 31, and Victoria is 28. Jonathan was born with a diagnosis of cerebral palsy, and he is nonverbal. He is clinically blind, and he has a lot of allergies. His hearing is very acute, and music is his life. And people surrounding him, stimulating him, is what he needs practically every day and every minute.
When we originally thought of creating a Microboard, the idea was very attractive to us as a family, because we wanted to make sure that when we're no longer around, that Jonathan, our son, was well taken care of, and that he was amongst people that was caring and eager to provide support to him. And the idea of the microboard was very appealing. We thought it was the key benefit of it would be succession planning.
When we formed the Microboard, we thought that the best members that we can get are ourselves, like Ray and I, and our children, Andrea and Victoria, and their spouse, Edward and Alvin. And of course, we have Jonathan as a member as well. So that makes us 7.
First, we had to select a name for the microboard, and we settled for JL Lim Support Group Incorporated. We did it all as a teamwork because we tossed around ideas for a name to all the directors of the microboard, and that's what we settled for unanimously. The next step, of course, was to apply now for incorporation. And the way we went around it was the website has a lot of information, and we did a lot of research. So it does use up a certain amount of your time, and that you've got to be willing to set aside to get all the facts and so on. And we looked at different examples and all instructions from the government on it, and we filed that application, the microboard, and it's very quick. It doesn't take very long. Most of the planning involved is putting together your thoughts for the application. And what we did is we did it as a team. I did the legwork, put things together, and distributed the information to every member of the microboard, or the potential microboard at that time, all of the people that could be sitting as directors, and got their consent, then went ahead and filed the application. We are now a registered corporation, and what that means, there are certain key things that you have to have in place. You have to have bylaws in place. You need to have employment contracts with your workers. And most important, you need to file an annual report to the government within 60 days of the anniversary of your date of incorporation. If you're thinking of starting a microboard, I think it's an excellent idea. I think you need to do it when you're able to do it, which is as soon as possible, because we're all at a stage where we're getting older. And it's like most things in life, you have to do it when you are able to do it. So to get going as soon as possible is good. Anything that you want to achieve in life of any significance usually takes time and it takes some work. So it's not unusual. This is no different to any project at work where you have to put in the work, but it's worth it because once it's set up, the going gets a lot easier.
So hopefully that inspired some of you to kind of understand a little bit the process and the thought that goes into when you're deciding to move forward with the microboard. In this case, the family really looked among themselves, but most microboards go beyond that at a later point. You obviously start with those who you trust most, but the hope is that eventually there are more and more people from the outside that might decide to join the microboard. And those people are found through ongoing facilitation. So from the existing network of support, there might be a couple of additional people that seem keen and interested and have formed relationships that might want to join that microboard at a later date. So we're going to get a little bit into supportive decision-making. And really this is about how we support a person to make decisions for their own life and make sure that they're making decisions with an informed decision-making process. So in Ontario, we have something called the substitute decision-making process in our legislation. We are hoping that one day it moves to more of a supportive decision-making framework. And there are some lawyers who are working on that, and some people, some advocacy groups working on that. But for the time being, we use a substitute decision-making model to support people in making decisions. So an example of the substitute decision-making model is the ODSP checks that your son or daughters get. You do not have to revoke their capacity or guardianship in order to support them in making decisions. They look at the closest relative to take on that role, who's willing to take on that role assigned by the person or assigned by the ODSP representative based on what makes sense and who came in to help with the application. So that's just an example of how it is now, but in the future, we would like it to move, if possible, to a more supportive decision-making framework, much like in BC, Manitoba, and the Yukon, where a group of people can come together and support a person in making a decision. So the concept of informed decision-making and supportive decision-making is again really based on what we see as a good life and honoring the person's ability to make choices and respecting their ability to make choices, even if they happen to be nonverbal and not able to communicate those choices. We all communicate our choices without using words at times, and those who are nonverbal have really been able to do that even better than the rest of us, and those around them are their best supporters, the people who have really good relationships with them and are intuitive, really are able to read people well in terms of what they like and don't like. So for those families who do have, and I think we have one session about that, Karen, about nonverbal communication, but it's a really good session. I think it's with Kathleen, right, that does that, one of the moms, yeah. So there's more information about how we support people in making decisions and value and respect their decision-making, even when they're nonverbal. This is a little reminder that under the UN Convention and Canada's Charter of Rights, we as human beings, as full citizens in our country, are able to make decisions, and we're encouraged to make decisions wherever possible. So whenever you have to go back to reminding yourself as to why you're including that person in the decision-making, it's because it's their right to do that as part of our Charter of Rights. Person-directed supports in general, when you read the framework of the Journey to Belonging, and when you talk to person-directed planners and facilitators, we will always talk about the importance of rights and choice. And it's in our language, throughout the language, it's in the language right now within the legislation as well, within MCCSS. If you read the Journey to Belonging, the plain language version, it talks quite strongly about choice and the right to make decisions. So let's talk about what that means for people on the Microboard and how they support people make decisions, because we talk often about family members doing that, but Microboards can be more than family members. They are people that have relationships with that person. And so the most crucial piece about supporting a person in making those decisions is that you have a relationship. You're intuitive, you could read them, you know when they're saying yes, when they really mean no. You can read their body language well. There is what we call ethics in supportive decision-making. So, and the ethics that I speak to often and remind Microboards about often is that sometimes the decisions will not be the decision that you want to make, but allowing that person to make that choice is okay. And sometimes the ethics is more about, do I and am I going to be receiving something, some kind of compensation in any way, whether it's financial or any kind of gain, if that decision is made. And you'll see that as part of the process of Microboards, there is an opportunity for people, whenever decisions are being made, for them to state that they are in a conflict of interest. So that's written in each agenda, so it supports that decision-making process as well. Roles and responsibilities, really, how do we all fit in? This is the piece about how you choose Microboard members. As a facilitator, one of the biggest things that I do is I identify possible Microboard members based on their strengths, their passions, their personality. And so what I'm looking for is a very holistic team to support that person. And so I do want some people on that team who are what we call maybe the naysayers, the ones who are always looking for the potential issues or the barriers. I want the other ones who are the the ones who are constantly the yeah people that we could do it. There's nothing that we can't surpass, etc. So really, when you look at as a facilitator, the microboard itself, it's really important for the facilitator to pull in different members based on their personality whenever possible. So when there's a gap in the microboard and there's a new position made available, or I don't see enough strength in one area in terms of supporting a person and making decisions, I might seek a new person to be part of the microboard based on their natural personality and how they support the person in making decisions and how comfortable they might make that person feel in voicing and sharing their own voice. All of us have to support people, and we do this naturally when we help friends and family and children and loved ones in making decisions. We support them by listening deeply, and it's a term that we use often as facilitators. And listening deeply just is basically a reminder that communication comes in many forms: nonverbal communication, movement, avoidance, getting up in a meeting and leaving. And in Jonathan's case, like I mentioned earlier, when we were talking about his housing model, when we noticed him starting to cry in the meetings and not being as happy and being down in between meetings, and just, we thought he was sick, we thought he was just down, it was the weather. We realized maybe it was what we were talking about, and he didn't really want to do what we were talking about. So we changed the housing model, and all of a sudden he perked up and we knew we were back on the right track. So that's an example of how the family was really deeply listening by watching and observing Jonathan and seeing how his body language and emotions had changed based on what we were talking about when we were describing the housing model that we were developing for him on behalf of him and with him. I mentioned a little bit earlier, dignity of risk. So we don't always expect people to make the right decision, and we need to learn to step back and allow them to make those decisions and learn to live with those consequences, just as we all learned all of the things that we know today through natural consequences. So never putting a person at danger, but allowing them to sometimes make mistakes so that they can learn from that mistake and also learn how to solve that mistake and not kind of fall down and not be able to get back up. So there's a quick little video here that I love because of the way the mom mentions and talks about getting out of the way. We'll just play this quickly.
I'm Vicki McCallum. I'm Karen Alexander, and we're founders of the Oak Park Family Group. The Oak Park Family Group consists of 8 families, and we all have a son or daughter with a developmental disability. And we've been spending the last couple of years looking for a sense of home and belonging and community for them. We're working very hard together to create inclusive lives and a sustainable future for our loved ones. The Oak Park Family Group was started as a result of many sleepless nights. I knew that I needed some support from other families. I knew that I needed resources. And all I knew at that point really was what I didn't want. And I didn't want a group home. I wanted my son to be able to make his own decisions. So I started a family network with just a few people, and it's grown a lot. And we've all been supporting each other since.
Nick was somewhat cocooned into that protective family environment. And we reached a point where we were aging, we were getting to be in our 60s. And with that being said, if something should happen to us, what happens moving forward? And that's what basically led us to where we are today again. It's been a remarkable journey for the 2 years, incredible journey.
What makes this model work, and one of the key components, is making a lot of community connections. So we're building lots of relationships and partnerships with community organizations. Another component that makes it work is having our community facilitator area. He's very instrumental. He's worked with each family in building the vision and plan for their family member on how they want to live in their community. And it's just so instrumental because it makes them more capable and reduces the amount of support they need. What surprised me is that I thought Jacqueline wasn't ready, but in fact, she just hadn't been given the opportunity or experience. And it was her parents that needed to get out of the way.
Yeah, can you tell me where the goldfish are? And it's yeah, right here.
I think I'll stop that there since she said exactly what I needed her to say, get out of the way. I loved that part. You guys are welcome to have check that out online if you want to watch the full version. It was a very interesting process. Eric Gall did, I think, a few different, I think there were 8 families in that one as well. And it was one of the ones that was allocated annualized funding through the Innovative Housing project in 2018. So often families and Microboard members need to have the resources to work within their role. So one of the things a facilitator would bring to the Microboard is different tools and resources to support people in gaining the skills necessary to support their role as part of a Microboard member. And really, the ones that I suggest often is Helen Sanderson and Associates. She has an online toolbox, basically, with person-centered tools. And she also has different types of tool sheets that support different parts of the development of the person's Microboard components. So some of the ones that I liked, actually, I don't know whether I mentioned this in a slide later. Actually, I think I do. It's in the hiring process. I'm not going to go into the ones I like, but this is a hyperlink as well. Karen, we send them this after, right? So people could look into this. I don't want to open it now because otherwise I get off the PowerPoint, but you're welcome to look through the different person-centered tools that are helpful to facilitators and to the Microboard themselves when supporting a person. There's other things that I do to assist a person. So one of the biggest areas that we want to do, again, as a facilitator of a Microboard, is make sure that we're really fostering that person's voice in whatever way we can. So if they're going to be an equal member of that team, they've got to be able to have the tools and the skills and the confidence to build and strengthen their voice. So the 2 websites that I really enjoy quite a lot when I work with people is the Connectability website, which has a lot of information about rights and dignity of risk. And then I also provide them with the Large Disability Law one, which is about respecting rights. Another thing that I do often as a facilitator is I might help the person with a goal of becoming a better self-advocate. There's different self-advocate groups across the province that might be something that they might want to join and be a part of to find and strengthen their voice as well. And also maybe to find a valued role within the community, because the advocacy groups tend to affect legislation, etc. So it's a really good valued role. So let's talk about what else I do as a facilitator within a Microboard when I'm supporting the person within their own role. So the person supported. And really, it's about making sure that they're just as ready for the meeting or more ready for the meeting than the Microboard members, other Microboard members themselves. So we do quite a few things before the meeting begins. About a week before, I'll sit down with them and prepare them for the meeting. And I basically act as almost their administrative assistant. We talk about the types of things that they'd like to have the Microboard assist them with. And I usually come with a bit of a template and ideas so that they can make choices. And we develop the agenda together, develop timelines. We make sure that we really discuss those agenda items ahead of time and make sure they're comfortable speaking to them and about them, and they're able to express what they want and what their hopes and dreams are for those areas on the agenda. I always include the actual person supporter's name on the agenda. So when we write an agenda, we write the item, I'll put the people who are speaking to it. even if it's an area that they are not necessarily speaking to, it is about them. And therefore I write their name / and the person who might be speaking about it. For example, it's the financial reporting. I also make sure that when I'm running a meeting that I'm providing all members on the Microboard an opportunity to speak. And if I see that one person might be quieter, then I might actually ask them a specific question based on what I know is their strength. Sometimes I actually have conversations before the meeting to prepare the Microboard members themselves, because I know they have strengths in different areas. For example, human resources, and they might have some ideas, but they might be a little bit shyer and not as comfortable with speaking up. I'll have that conversation ahead of time, and then I'll casually, say, hey, we just talked about this week. Can you share a little bit about what your thoughts are on this with the team? And again, that's the importance of the facilitator, to know the different team members and have relationships with different team members of the Microboard as well. So I'm going to give you practical things because that's my personality. I like very tangible things that people can grab and go with. So one of the things that I do, I'm on Jonathan's Microboard. I'm one of his directors, and I guess unpaid facilitator, because you can't be a paid facilitator and a Microboard director. So I help him with his Microboard just because I've known him forever, since he was born. And one of the things I do is I help him choose his staff. And how I do that is I prepare him for the interview process. And I do that by using a tool called the All About Me, which is another Helen Sanderson tool. So it is basically a one-page profile that he has completed about himself, about what people appreciate about him, what's important to him, how he likes to be supported in his vision. And I have all the people who were considering to interview develop their own one-page profile as well. So Jonathan can see in his own language, in equal language, a little bit about them. He chooses people based on what their passions are. That's who he is. And so if a person loves walking and he loves walking, he's going to choose a staff not on their resume and where they worked for 22 years, but on the fact that they walk regularly and know all the trails in the province of Ontario. That's his thing, right? So he chooses people based on what makes him smile. So I help him through that process, looking at the one-page profiles, etc. And then once all the staff are hired, one of the things I do to support his staff team is that on a yearly basis, we have little Fuji pictures of each staff member, and I have what looks like a dartboard, and I have him place the pictures around the circle, around the center, based on who he wants to spend more time with and who he maybe has had a skill with. When I train staff and support staff in their role, I let them know that this is the process, and it's the process because all of us have different things that happen in our life and different interests, very keen interests, especially Jonathan. And so he might get sick of walking and decide he wants to learn how to play guitar. And so move that person out of the circle a little bit and move the person who has a guitar closer. It's just a way to make sure that his voice and his team and how he wants to be supported really happens. And if you hire people with them knowing this is how you do it, they don't take it personally. They actually embrace that he's able to really strongly share his voice that way. Some of the other things I do to support a person in being practical when we're coming to a Microboard team is for goals like financial asks. So for example, if somebody really wants to go on a vacation, it's really important for them to go to the beach every year. We might bring back different ideas to the team, to the Microboard, and ask them to kind of brainstorm different ways to make sure they get to the beach. So it might mean, going on with a group of people because it's less expensive, or renting, an Airbnb because they can't afford a hotel, and maybe having 6 people go because he could only pay 1/6 type thing. So we work together to explore all those options at the Microboard level with the person. And that's how we support the decision-making. I use a lot of pictures. I love my Fuji camera and I love iPad pictures. So a lot of the times we bring pictures into the game. Some people I support them in making almost, I guess it's like designers do, vision boards, right? Of what they want their life to look like that year. So that's how they come to the table with their financial ask for the year. This is like my dreams for the year. Here's what I want to do. And they bring pictures and they cut things out from a magazine. So it's really about incorporating the person into the meeting and making sure their voice is really truly heard, and people then realize it's really coming from them and not from a third party. I have a tool that I use as well. So when I support people in kind of being full members of their community, a lot of what we do is we explore various options. Let's say 3 gyms, let's try Good Life, this other gym here, and this yoga studio. And after each activity, when they go with their support staff 2 or 3 times, they complete an evaluation of the space, the lighting, the people there. It's a really fast 1-page form that they circle how they're feeling, like a smile to a frown, in like 5 different areas. So that's another way we make sure we're really getting strong feedback from the person supported. And then we bring those little sheets of paper to our microboard meeting and say, yeah, we know Good Life is cheaper, but they really loved the yoga studio, right? It made them happy, etc. And so decisions are made based on the person's interests and strengths and their choice. The final area is really making sure that there's feedback provided by the circle themselves in the microboard, but also the person, back and forth conversation, discussions, feedback. And then as a facilitator, I would support them with providing some of that feedback. There are times when there's, especially at the beginning of forming a new team, we see the person sometimes be a little quieter than they should be. So part of the role of a facilitator is to encourage them to find that voice. They will find that voice, especially if they're really prepared ahead of time in terms of what kind of questions might come their way, and they have time to process it ahead of time. The benefit of actually the facilitator is we're a neutral party. So I just want to ground that also with everybody, that it's not like there's, again, anything for a facilitator to gain from them choosing one activity over another activity. We're going to talk a little bit more about, and this is Adam, who I had worked for years with, and I just loved the way he prepared for the meeting. He taught me so much. So a lot of what we know, we've been taught by people that we supported who were really teaching us along the way. So the beauty of Adam is he always came to the meetings so prepared. He is the guy who wanted, and everything was a celebration. So would come in and he had, made his own cake and ordered the food that he wanted. And it was really based on how he wanted the party to feel. He would bring out a whiteboard showing what he does and what a day in his life looks like, his weekly whiteboard, because we started a whiteboard process at the very beginning to support him in making decisions and keep track of his calendar. He doesn't like the computer or iPad. He prefers a big, huge whiteboard that he would bring to the table. He had lots of choice boards, and that's how he started, but he doesn't need that anymore. He's really quite able to do it now with his own whiteboard. And he uses a week at a glance, a small week at a glance. So he brings to his meetings all that information so that everyone on the Microboard team knows how busy his day is and how are able to talk about and ask him questions about what he enjoyed. And he always he writes up 2 or 3 pages of what happened over the last few months and acknowledges every person in that circle, which he's fostering the relationships more than I am, because he's acknowledging the time that he spent with his aunt learning how to cook, and he slept over at her condo, and he had access to the pool, and he spent the night sitting at the pool instead of coming up to bed. Like, it's just, he's a great storyteller, and he really draws people in because of that. And he's taught me how to kind of share that story with other people so that they too can begin to have people in their circles see the beauty in a person's life when you let them explore their life fully, or you encourage them to explore their life fully. The other thing he does often is he brings to the table a list of how he wants to spend his own money. He works at an Italian furniture making place, and he makes some good money along with his ODSP, but then he comes to the table making sure that people know how he's going to be spending his money. And sometimes there are things that his parents would not be happy with, like big, bright lit kind of welcome to my dungeon lights, right? Going down to his man cave. But it's embraced because everyone's so happy that he's found his voice. And I'm losing one. Okay, get my voice again. Okay, how do I support Microboard members? And so these are the different people in the Microboard. And like I said at the beginning, it's an incorporation and it's a real board of directors membership. So there are different roles in a Microboard, just as there are different roles in a not-for-profit. And so at the very beginning, when you do develop those bylaws and identify whose role is what, there will be the role of the chair and the co-chair, a secretary, so a person taking the minutes, the financial person who's going to be reporting in that area. A human resource person is always a good role to have because that is an ongoing piece of Microboards, hiring and firing and contracting. And I like the director of fun and community relationships because that is why we're there. So I know that's not supposed to be part of the director piece, but I add that into any Microboard that I work with because we want to make sure it's all about fun still. And so how do we identify who does what? It's all the same way we identify who does what within our friend groups, who's good at what, right? We all have strengths in different areas or interests. And so we encourage people to take on the role that they match most with, that speaks to them. And so usually the person who's director of fun community relationship is the extrovert, the one who's always thinking of the best party in town, who is always thinking of the newest things to do. You know, axe throwing a few years ago was a big thing. Now I think it's those escape rooms that everyone's doing together as Microboards to kind of bond and once or twice a year go out and have fun together. There doesn't only have to be, by the way, even though there's 5 roles here, one person can be the chair and in charge of financials. So you could take on more than one role. It doesn't have to be one person per role at all. There are some people on the team that don't want a role, and that's okay as well. So like I said, we identify people based on their strengths and their leadership style for each of those areas. Here's where my passion comes in, succession planning. That's why Microboards exist. I have something called the 4 pillars of sustainability, one of which is Microboards, the other one's facilitation, the network of support and friendship is the third one, and the last one is your ally agency. So one of the big areas that I look at when I work with Microboard, and I start with right at the very beginning, is succession planning, because we all have lives and we can't be guaranteed that all 5 members will be there for 2, 3, 4 years. And so we're always looking as a facilitator for other people who might be interested in being pulled in. And then there's areas within, especially when you're looking at a person's life, most of the people that we support get passport funding. There's areas where we want to be able to pass the torch on, especially from mom and dad who are usually doing it, to somebody else. So for example, Jonathan's team, there was one sister who is really good at financial pieces. And so she started working with her mother, and it's been 3 years that she started working with her mother to understand the guidelines to put submissions in once every couple of months so that she knew how to do it and she was more familiar. Now she's doing it on my direct plan. And in the next year, we're having moms starting to send scans to her instead to do the submissions independently. So it takes a while to make sure the person feels comfortable with it. And what we try to do is work the older generation out of business and have the younger generation start taking on more of those roles. Same thing with hiring staff. Even if one person is taking on that role, we want to make sure we're teaching other people in that Microboard how that's being done. And if there's nobody who has the interest, then it's time for the facilitator to pull in somebody else to support that area. I'm sure that some of you have heard about individualized funding. Some people do have individualized funding, even though it's technically not in existence. There's quite a few people that have annualized funding, some of which you saw in the video there, Jonathan, and also the Oak Ridge people. So part of the Microboard's role is administering money from the government. So technically, Microboards can be and are signing authorities for passport funding as well as individualized funding. And so part of the role would be to support the processing of all of those invoices, hiring the right staff, identifying who the facilitator would be, entering into contract with the facilitator, looking for the right technology to support efficiencies, et cetera, maybe brokering with rights with an agency, an ally agency, hiring them as a human resource coordinator if there's nobody internally who can do it, et cetera. When I look at long-term sustainability of a plan, I believe that facilitators need to know about all the possibilities of resources out there to support this plan. And so we've talked about passports, which most people have. Some people don't have enhanced, but that's an area that you should be working on as a microboard, advocating for. There's also something called family managed home care, which is basically funded through the Ministry of Health. And so if a facilitator is supporting microboard and there tends to be some gaps maybe identified in terms of supporting the person into their future years, especially if the person's living in their family home still, and we're looking at how can we have mom and dad not necessarily contribute as much time and energy. Part of the role of the facilitator and of the microboard would be to explore all of these other funding resources, including family managed home care. And I'm happy to answer questions about that as well in the future, as well as any of these other things like, you know, how do you find technology, or what agencies would you see as an ally agency that might be able to support the microboard in the future and be hired by the microboard, etc. Other things that I think are important for succession planning is mostly age of the microboard members. We want to make sure that we always look at a dynamic and diversity in age. And so that as I see people aging, I bring in the next generation. My big joke with some of the families, Jonathan's family, for example, they have grandkids that I've seen growing up now. They've 10 years now. So some of them are 10 and coming and sitting at the table now, sitting and listening into the meetings. I'm like, here's the next generation getting ready to take over, right? We need the younger generation. Again, it's all about making decisions together, supportive decision-making, but also working together to make those decisions. And so sometimes when we make those really hard decisions that we don't know enough about, the way that I do it is by inviting the specialists to the table. So maybe having 2 or 3 accountants come and present how they would manage, for example, the family managed home care funding and individualized funding, how they would do the bookkeeping, and their experience in that area, et cetera. I have a family that I'm working with right now that's just changing accounting firms. And as a microboard, we're meeting with the accounting firm to really sit down and investigate whether the right fit for the family in the long term, because they have two kids with different needs that has to be managed. Another way we learn together, I mean, how we make decisions together is by learning together. So if we all have the same information, then we could have a really thoughtful conversation. So sometimes it's about attending live events. Sometimes it's about attending these Microboards Ontario meetings where everyone's learning together, joining, people like Brendan Porin to learn about hiring, and Cheryl to learn about HR management and hiring. It's all about making sure we all have the same information, so then we can make a really informed decision together rather than coming from different places. So what is a facilitator's role within the microboard meeting? We've talked about preparing the individual. We talked about the microboard agenda. So, although I have a template, I would go to the individual and all the microboard members to see if there's other pieces that they want to add on to that agenda. As a facilitator, I would also support the use of a shared drive. So a Google Drive, a shared drive, to have all of our documentations in one place, so much easier. I also encourage it, by the way, not only for the microboard, but also a separate drive for the staff team, so the operational piece of it. So for example, in the person's own Google Drive for their team to access might be all the medical information, might be everything to do about scheduling, all the protocols that the person needs, etc. Because we want that accessible to the staff so they could work together as well. The other thing that again I do as a microboard is I would identify where we might have gaps and pull together presentations, bring the specialists to the table, invite them, coordinate those pieces, etc. And finally, one of the big areas that we do is make sure we're not missing those deadlines, those timelines for the annual general meeting and incorporation auditing, all of those kind of things that have to happen. Usually how we do that is we actually have a spreadsheet or a cheat sheet at the beginning of the folder where it gives us the dates and timelines within our schedules, and we actually plan our meetings around those timelines. And finally, it doesn't happen often, but the importance of developing bylaws is there because it reduces the need to facilitate any kind of conflict within a team. So if there is any conflict, and I haven't had any to date, we go back to the bylaws and see what the rules say in terms of how we make decisions in these situations. So that's why the development of bylaws is so important. So future, how do we plan for the future? How do we support the future needs of a person? Especially just like you heard Jonathan's family say, his father said, you know what, as you age, you need microboards more. And often I see that myself is really, it's about microboards are developed because parents realize they're not going to be on this earth longer than their children, or they hope they won't be on this earth longer than their children. And they want to make sure there's a safe and secure supportive mechanism for their sons or daughters to continue living their best lives. So fostering that network of support and friendship is something that facilitators do, because that's how we pull in our future microboard members. We keep an eye on the ages of our microboard team. We make sure there's diversity within that team. Somebody might be into human resources, another person really likes finances, somebody else is the fun person. I keep an eye on who does what and how the interests in the members match what we need as part of our group. As a team and as a facilitator, I'm always looking to maximize and optimize resources. So I might bring information to the table about financial opportunities, new things within the DSO, family managed home care, the Canada Ontario Housing Benefit are just examples. Those are subsidies available to support the financial sustainability of the person's lifestyle. And we know that life gets expensive for families. There's only so much estate planning people can do. So having a facilitator that's aware of how to be creative and what else might exist outside of MCCSS, the Ministry of Children and Community Services, is really important. People who are creative, people who think differently, people who might be able to even increase efficiencies by working with other families, etc. All of those things are something that a good facilitator would do to assist a microboard to make sure that the life that the person wants, the best life, is possible. The final thing that facilitators do a lot of is make sure that there's partnerships involved with the microboard itself. So that's outsourcing some of these pieces, because we can't do everything. A facilitator is not an expert in all of these areas, nor are the people on the microboard necessarily experts. So it's about outsourcing to the right person. So it might be HR coordination, it might be the bookkeeping or accounting pieces, and that's where the ally agency might come in for some pieces as well. So maybe they are going to be providing the staffing solutions, or maybe they're actually going to be doing the finances, because there are some agencies that would do the finances for families if you outsourced it to them. So we're just going to get into also how we work together and how we share information. So I talked already about having Google Drives or Dropboxes. It's a great way to share information. Within the Dropbox, we usually have an ongoing Excel sheet to show where we are financially. So it should never be a surprise when people come to the meeting. They should have access to that anyway. We would still attach the agenda, especially when it's the annual general meeting, to make sure that it's all there and accessible. We usually have a drive for employees, including the employee onboarding piece, which is like the training stuff, all the protocols. And I love the concept of doing videos to train staff, because that means that as a facilitator, I don't have to, pay for a staff to be there longer to train a new staff than they have to be. There's videos available for them, although we still do have double staffing during times when we're training staff. It's not as necessary because you still have the videos to watch as well. To prepare for the future, because mom and dad aren't always going to be there and they can't always give all the information in their head, I also make sure that that Google Drive has the list of everything to do with the medical needs of the person. So the list of supplies, the list of doctors, a list of specialists, all within the Google Drive. Any protocol or guideline for care is going to be absolutely necessary. Protocols support your staff team in doing things the same way and maintaining safety for people. So this is just kind of like the back office stuff of running the life, or supporting running the life of the person in a safe way, to make sure that they don't have to repeat their story as often, to make sure they're supported consistently instead of having to have people do things differently, which would be really uncomfortable for people. Their daily care needs are all specified also. I have a tool that I use which gives every hour of every day what has to be done. If there's something that's kind of needed to happen, a checklist almost, so that people know what's expected. I also add into the Google Drive something to support healthcare visits. It's an actual document that was created by Surrey Place and emergency room doctors. So that's a little trick that I do, is I have families complete that so that when a staff is going to the doctor, they could bring that healthcare visit sheet, which has all the information, including, you know, what would it look like if the person's anxious and how to best approach them, how to explain things to them, etc. It's just 3 pages, but it's really a godsend, especially when you don't know which staff is bringing someone to the doctor. This is the link to it. It's the health card link. And that is it. I spoke really quickly, so we have time for questions. Hopefully I didn't check the time. But yeah, we still have a few minutes for questions, if people have questions.